teaching people the skills and tools for being able to cultivate well-being and to cultivate resilience long before they even needed it, but certainly long before they ever reach clinical levels of anxiety and depression, that we can move everybody to the right side of that scale. And so let's say you're even at a +2 most of the time. That's fantastic. But imagine if we could move you to a +4 or a +6. Then when those crises come, and if you have a chronic disease, you're navigating a lifetime ahead of you of challenges and navigating ground that's changing all the time. That then when you hit those crisis periods, rather than going from, say, a 0 to a -5 or 8 or 10, you can take yourself maybe from a +6 to a +2, or even a 0, but you don't go spiral so far down that it takes so long to come back again. So here are some numbers that I thought would be really interesting to look at, and that is, what are the levels of, if we look at this as a overall sense of our capacity for good quality of life, for a high level of well-being, how much of that is influenced by our genetics, how much of it is influenced by our environment, and how much is influenced by our attitude or interpretations about life. And I'd like you, before I go ahead and reveal the next slide, to just assign a number to that for yourself. When you look at those numbers, 50%, 40%, and 10, in your own mind, what would you think represents the influence of genetics on your capacity for well-being in your life, the influence of environmental factors, and the influence of attitudes or beliefs? And if you're like most people, chances are that most people imagine that genetics make up about 50%, and in that case, you would be absolutely right if that was what you chose. That environmental factors or situations that happen to you in your life represent about 40%, and that beliefs or attitude or the way we respond to something represents about 10%. And that's the place that I find most interesting, because the actual statistics on it are that the event or the environmental factors represent about 10%, and the beliefs and reactions represent about 40%. And why is that important to know? Well, it's important because it helps us to understand that we often invest the majority of our energy in things that we actually can't control, which is trying to control outside events or environments, wishing that things were different than they are. When the truth of the matter is that if we could harness that same energy and turn it toward our reactions to what's happening, and even more importantly, or equally importantly, to our interpretation of what's happening, we could have a profoundly different effect on our outcome and our experiences with something, with negative things that are happening in our life.